Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kelly O'Dwyer Manuel, and welcome to a special live edition of Dynamically Speaking, our expert insight series from Axiomatics on all things authorization, zero trust, identity and access management. With me, I have Jim Barkdoll, the CEO of Axiomatics, who has kindly indulged us with his time this morning to talk about all of these things. Apologies, folks. Live, there's always something, and I was hearing the echo on YouTube, so fix that issue. We're good to go. Hi, Jim. Sorry about all of the back and forth there, and welcome.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks, Kelly.
So before we get into the questions, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about Axiomatics briefly and your role, background a little bit, and then we can hop right in.
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to do so. So I've been with Axiomatics now for just over a year. I've been in technology and mostly cybersecurity for 30 years, which those of you that I've talked to know I don't like to admit. It's been a long time. And for most of that, I've been really intrigued in following around security, the effect that policy has on organizations and the value that it brings to organizations, especially from a security perspective. So I had met Axiomatics, who is the leader in authorization, dynamic authorization, or orchestrated authorization about 6-7 years ago, and saw the value at that time that they as the leaders and now we as leaders in the space had brought to authorization from a leadership position. And as the market matured and timing wise for my career really worked out well, that Axiomatics was just beginning a new growth momentum and taking advantage of what we see in the market. All of us see in the market now, certainly the transition to the cloud, the importance around zero trust, and the value that CIM and Kim is bringing to, or the attention rather, that is bringing to the need for better or enhanced authorization.
Excellent, thank you. So, you know, that's a great segue actually into our first question. So you've been with Axiomatics for a little while now. You've been CEO for around the 90-day-ish mark. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned in that time?
You know, I would say the most positive thing is that Axiomatics is who I believed it was over a year ago when I joined, right? So I would say probably the most surprising thing is there is no, as I got more and more access through my partnership with the founder of the company, Babak Siddiqui, as I got to learn more and work closer day to day with all of the groups in the organization, not just the go-to-market teams, the passion and the experience of the people here at Axiomatics has been everything I'd hoped and thought it was. Additionally, as we've dug in further, I would say the biggest happy surprise, or not really surprise, but rather reaffirmation, is that the value that our customers are getting out of the solution, the more we learn about the use cases, and some of them are over 10 years old in terms of customers, the maturity level that they're hitting with our product is also really exciting.
Excellent, excellent. And so as I go through these questions, Jim, I also wanted to take this opportunity to remind the folks that are watching us on the YouTube stream that they can also post their questions in the chat, and also obviously like and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more. But as we see those questions pop up, certainly we will ask them to you live here too. So speaking of questions and conversations then, in the conversations you've had with customers, and I know that you've spent a lot of time, certainly since you've been with the company and particularly since you've been CEO, talking to a lot of our customers of all sizes, what are the things that are keeping them up at night, they're really top of mind, that pop up in most of these conversations?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think first, just to kind of provide a distinction, there is, I refer to everyone in the go-to-market as a customer or a potential customer. So when we're talking about specifically our customer base, I would say the things that keep them up at night is the same thing that's keeping everybody up, which is a resourcing issue, right?
Right.
That is certainly everything we've been seeing in our, whether it's our conversations with the analysts, all of our intimate conversations with customers or prospects, or some of the recent industry meetings that we've attended. certainly that continues to be the prevailing issue, is that a scarcity of qualified resources in security. And so what that leads to is more and more pressure or need for certainly what we're calling orchestrated authorization, but orchestration in general, right? A commonality or a way that solutions, especially starting from an identity-centric standpoint, can work together and create a cohesive IAM strategy. And so our customers, what keeps them up at night is just working through the progression of that crawl, walk, run methodology that we put in front of them. Is how can they move faster into really the run situations, which would be risk-based policies that are a little bit more complicated, a little bit more mature in nature, and draw from many attribute sources, especially sources like CrowdStrike, for example, where you can learn very intimate details or useful data about your customer or your employee that's accessing an application, and provide a risk tolerance level policy that says, what is my risk tolerance, as an organization, and do I want to let this person or system, take this type of action or get this type of access. From the prospect side, certainly again, the resourcing is probably the biggest issue. And then again, I think just looking for many people are still, I wouldn't say stuck, but they're, when they look at access, they're focused on static, right? And so how do I make that move from a static standpoint, and almost all of my systems, all this work that I've done for the last 10 years is based on a static offering. I've got these attributes that don't change. I want to provide this type of access to someone, or I've built in custom access into siloed applications. So now how do I make that change as an organization? How do I move over to identity centric and move to really dynamic policies that can change the behavior inside my organization, and at the same time be secure, right? So you need to have a system where you're going to be able to go back and log these events and occasions where someone has been a permit or deny, or just what types of access, what type of entitlements did I allow someone based on a policy inside my organization.
Okay, excellent. And I know, a lot of prospects and partners prospects and customers look to partners to be able to implement security frameworks and architectures, particularly as we start to see, new and better ways of thinking about security, really, when it comes to things like zero trust, or looking at, the cybersecurity mesh architecture, and how would you go about implementing those pieces and parts. What are the things that partners in particular are chatting to you about, or the issues that they're seeing, to your mind?
Yeah, first I'd like to say, again, reiterate, we're a 100% channel organization, 100% partner friendly. I believe in cybersecurity, the only way that our customers and prospects can be successful is off of the expertise that our partners bring, right? And so whether that's people at the global integrator level or the people at the local cybersecurity partner level, all of them are bringing value to their customers. And I would say, similar to what I talked about, the challenge that our customers are looking at, certainly the partners are the ones dealing with the integration between these technologies. Which technologies can I bring together that match a zero trust, a NIST 800 reference architecture that says, I've got an identity-centric strategy, and these are the pieces that I know if I bring these together, complete that loop that everyone's looking for. The partners have the biggest challenge, is that they're tasked with making these things work together. And so if us as vendors aren't providing that easy access point, that orchestration, that places a lot of strain on them to really, how do they put these best of breed vendors together for the customer and not make it look like siloed projects, which it often is at this point, right? So what happens now, mostly for our partners, and the burden they share, is someone may or may not get budget for a specific project, a specific need that is just one part of the story, and the organization thinks they're done. I've gone in, I've put in an IGA or an IAM system, or I provided a PAM, or I did multi-factor authentication, and they think, okay, great, I've stopped that and I've digested it. Let's see how it works. And as we all know, obviously on the cybersecurity side, those are just pieces, those are stops along the way. And in order to get to a maturity where you're truly protecting your organization, you need to add all of those components into a solution.
Okay, excellent. And we actually have a question on this particular topic that's come in off of the chat, so thank you so much for that. So technical people more or less understand the need for Axiomatics, and that's certainly, I think, been our experience as well. However, higher managers may not understand the value. So how do you position the solution that makes it acceptable for them? And I know we've had these conversations. How do you translate that technical value to those higher level users?
It's such a great question, and this is a truly still a work in progress for me. So just a little bit about me. I've spent certainly the most recent in my career in the CEO level and running the entire organization, but I came up through the sales ranks, and my passion lies with conveying a message at an executive level and creating a project in most cases, educating the customer at an executive level to what their exposures are, how this fits into their business strategies, and then create a project with all the constituents involved. In our cases, obviously it's the technology team, it's the security team, it's the IAM team, it's the business team, and in some cases the end user, the teams that represent the end users. And so that what I always find the most successful approach is of course the go high and educate them. In this particular market where we're focused on orchestrated authorization, and we just saw this firsthand last week at the Gartner Security Conference, a lot of great people there, a lot of C-level titles. I would say it was difficult for them to grasp or to comprehend, where does authorization fit, right? So many of them think authorization's already happening, or I've already done this. This isn't a problem, and I think they fail to see often how does this connect, or their teams aren't bubbling up enough the problem and where this fits into the broader strategy. So, our audience, our partners, our customers, the people that are controlling this, certainly it's in the CISO office, but IAM, the IAM teams are the ones that have the lead. So, it's in all of our best interests to try to educate the IAM teams or show them, the different challenges that they have, not just in one specific technology. Like for example, on the identity piece, show them the larger orchestration play, and then help them to sell this internally to their own organization. Starting at the executive level in many cases has been very difficult for them to understand something that really is a technology that becomes part of the plumbing, right? What we do, authorization, is in the fabric of all of these applications, and it can get down to a very granular level that sometimes is difficult, I think, for the executive leadership to wrap their arms around.
That's fair. And I mean, I think, certainly identity and access management, IAM, has been around for a long time. But now seems to have renewed interest, renewed attention placed on it, and rightly so. There's a number of reasons why, from the ever-evolving cybersecurity threat landscape to the additional needs for better and more adaptive access through the pandemic and all of that kind of thing. And I think in line with that, we've continued to see a lot of innovation, certainly, more so I think than in years past, and a lot of funding in the IAM space, certainly particularly in 2021, 2022. Of the things that have happened, and we saw even more, last week, the first few months of this year, are there any surprises for you, Jim? Anything you saw that you thought, I didn't see that one coming?
I would say the only surprise is some of the valuation numbers. I think are surprising if you look at the amounts. We talk about bubbles or the competitiveness for PE firms or VC firms to go in the space, and I think there's some astounding valuations which are really exciting. What's not surprising though is the amount of interest and investment that's coming into this, and that speaks volumes. Even if the executive teams themselves aren't yet seeing it, right. Analysts are seeing it. The investment community is seeing it. Certainly, our user communities know this, and so if you look at, why do I think there is so much interest in the space? If you look at what happened at the identity level, at the IAM level, it was really a similar type of move that we're seeing now at the access or the authorization level, right? So when you look at authentication used to be fragmented. It was happening in multiple spots, and so great vendors brought that and created a market that became more commodity based of I've got to have this, I've got to have an identity centric, an authentication, a centralized authentication that I can manage. It's the same strategy that and why the investments coming into this is now, if you look again at that NIST or zero trust reference architecture, that step one is authentication, step two is authorization, and authorization in this case should be dynamic because the applications, the systems we're building, the transition to the cloud, the issues we faced in the pandemic all pointed out that that barrier is gone at the what we used to think of our walls around our organization, and now we need to have a dynamic authorization as that second step that says, okay, based on all of these conditions that are live and pulling and possibly changing, what's the policy I need to put in place to protect my organization? And so that's where I think you can see it's just a repeat of what's already happened over the last 10 years is really just starting out in the authorization market.
Excellent. And we have another question coming in from the audience. Solving complex access challenges is a part of the Axiomatics strategy as of now. How do you see that changing in the next 2 years? And a tip of the hat here, because that was going to be one of my questions, which was what's coming up for Axiomatics. So this plays in nicely. So Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So our vision is clear in this space, and so first the broad support was orchestrated authorization. So when you look at an enterprise level, what goes into that, right? And so there is several different constituents in that process that should have input and abilities to make changes or create policy, but it should all be with a really easy to follow and easy to put in place system for balances and checks. And so if you're if you're a developer, you should have a certain type of access. If you're a security specialist, and you're helping create policies, maybe there's a global policy that you want to put in place, you should have that ability to supersede follow-on policies. And then most importantly, when you look at the users that are non-technical, the everyday business users that understand what types of access they want to give to the consumer of their application, they need very simple access to create non-technical policies, right? Not from a developer or a security analyst, but more from the everyday user. And so it's continuing to build. We provide all three of those things today, but enhancing those capabilities so that becomes much more seamless. That's our near-term roadmap. We already deliver on it today, but that's what we're going to continue iterating on, and you'll see lots more to come from us on that front.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, and thank you for the question as well. So I think that's a good indicator of where we see things going for the balance of 2022, and I think we're in June. I think it's fair to ask about 2023 now. Where do you think investors in the security space, and in particular in the IAM space, are going to be looking for the balance of the year?
I think it's much of the same, right? There's not an unknown technology that yet needs to be developed or thought of, at least in the IAM space. It's clear. What I think will happen is that there'll be more clarity, there will be more partnerships, there will be better integrations between the technology ecosystem, between the IAM vendors and the authorization vendors. And I also see a growing, we've already pioneered and long been advocates from both an application level, which is, what are the types of interactions and policies about what I'm allowing a user to see or do inside the application, and the data or the big data access, right? So when you're talking about a data lake or something like Databricks, for example, or large data sources of structured data where you want to control the access of things coming to specific points of data, more in the data access governance market. So when you look at the CDO and their teams, they've got access issues as well. So we're starting to see some of those requests combine into the IAM team where they're trying to come up with a cohesive strategy for how do I take this centralized theme around authorization and access and apply it to all my types of systems. So I think you'll see some continued investment in those areas, and we already see it, from amazing partners like Immuto, for example, that just raised $100 million in that space.
Excellent, excellent. And we have another question actually as well on the topic that we're just discussing here now. Can Axiomatics support authorization at the API or database level?
Yeah, so we just kind of talked through that. So yes, so that's certainly one of our strengths. And if you look at kind of the lowest hanging fruit for any organization, it would be at the API gateway, for example. Right. So connecting and intercepting multiple applications. So especially when you're talking about legacy applications or cloud-based applications, you've already leveraged an API gateway like a MuleSoft, for example. And then at the data level, there's really two instances, right? There's the data as it relates to me as the single user coming into an application and interacting with data. We do that natively through our application platform. The big data, the data access governance opportunity that I'm talking about, while we've played in that space, that's where really, I think you've got to look at, there's very specific partners and needs in that space that address the larger big data portion of those types of use cases. And so We've got several strong partners in that space as well.
Excellent, excellent. Those were the questions I had. Again, folks, anybody with any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. But Jim, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us here? Anything that maybe I didn't ask?
I don't. I think it was a good session of questions. I think probably the only thing that I would add is just again on the resourcing and the services component. While I think probably the biggest challenge that I've seen in organizations is the fact that there seems to be a general malaise on new projects and kind of a hangover from the pandemic, perhaps, and or again going back to that resource issue. So I think they're whether it's our prospects and customers that are looking for how do they help frame this project up? How do they help raise it to the importance? I think speaking up and taking that taking the burden of wanting to change your organization for the better and kind of create a rally flag around security, that you need to continue to push up against your management team to escalate this to the attention that it needs to have and really take on the passion that you want to change the company and create a project, or why you should implement the project. Because I think what we're seeing is there is many projects that are continuing and there's resources that kind of certainly go along, but there's been there's been kind of a delay in finalizing those, right? So it's kind of almost been this accepted thing of no end in sight to a project, and that kind of mirrors what we see in all the things we access as a society today, right? Whether it's customer service or it's goods and services that are backlogged because of supply chains. That same thing is happening to us in a technology situation where I think we've just kind of let this overhead drag on for too long. So people that are passionate about their job, I guess I would just implore them that they should take that leap and put themselves out there a bit on behalf of their organization and continue to try to sell the value that security plays in their organization and why this should continue to be a board issue.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And this actually, your commentary has definitely sparked some questions from the folks who are joining us today. So thank you, folks. Some great questions here. So I'll start with this first one, which is great. Do you see AI contributing to bettering attribute-based access control, ABAC?
It's a great question. That's certainly not. I think you have to kind of break down AI, right? So there's right now we don't have a play or an investment on our own of adding AI to say, based on all these factors, create a policy because these incidents are occurring. So, but where I do think that bits of AI come into play is what's coming from our partners already, and that's people like CrowdStrike, for example, that have AI built into their systems. And so the better we can get a handle on or incorporating, whether it's big data that's coming from this that we can use as attributes, or real-time information, or AI policy-driven information coming from our partners, incorporating that into sophisticated security policy that say, based on all these factors, allow or don't allow, or change the interface, that already happens today. So I see that role, AI continuing to help there. In the future, could there be a situation where, you know, we help make suggestive policy because based off of all the success of our customers? That could happen as well, and I could see AI being a strong component there.
For sure, for sure. Another great question coming in here. How does Axiomatics differentiate from other policy-based access vendors? It feels like PBAC is becoming a thing, and certainly we hear the term PBAC a lot. We hear talk about policy, and I know that's something that you and the senior leadership team are very passionate about. So looking for your thoughts there, Jim.
Yeah, again, no disrespect or abbreviations, and you know, some of our vendors go out and try to redefine on what ABAC is, or what PBAC is, or what dynamic authorization is, or orchestrated authorization. We and have for years, we comply and supply all of those things, right? So attribute-based access control is a term of which you would use policy, which has always been at the heart of our solution, to deliver and say, based on these attributes, deliver an outcome. So I don't think there's a differentiation there on which terminology you necessarily relate to. I do think that there is, I know that there is a strong differentiator for us on the fact that when you look at the types of, the speed at which you need to connect and apply a policy is a differentiator for us, and the resiliency of the system itself for that to always be available. I often talk recently about one of our great customers. They had they're a large multinational global banking institution, millions of users that we're fortunate to have, and we provide authorization for them. They had an internal denial of a service attack. Every system went down except Axiomatics in that case, right? So when you talk about the ability to handle transactions, millions of transactions, and supply that back at the same speed of which users are used to from an authentication standpoint, that is super important, and that's a huge differentiator for us today. And I would add on to that the types of policies we can put in place, right? So if you're a security leader or an IAM leader, and you're working with your development organization, and you want to put together a very complex global policy that brings together multiple attributes and multiple levels, that's something that we thrive in today.
Excellent. So the next question is a two-parter. So the first part is how, and you were just talking about different attributes. So how do we protect against dynamic IPs, which would certainly be a type of attribute? And also, when we talk about secure collaboration, are you referring to protecting currently used collaboration platforms, or does Axiomatics provide tools to securely collaborate?
Sorry, repeat that last question.
So the last part is talking about secure collaboration. So by that, do we mean protecting currently used collaboration platforms, or are we talking about Axiomatics providing a tool to enable secure collaboration?
Well, we already provided a tool for secure collaboration based on the fact that we're connecting via APIs to all of your different attribute sources, and then we're taking that and then we're intercepting then at the application level to applying that policy, right? So we're not doing anything to interrupt or unenhance your security strategy that way. We are not providing, or nor are we looking to provide a separate service that says bring all these pieces together and we're creating a one secure link via these. That already exists via the enterprise or the cloud infrastructure that we're participating in. So I don't mean to say when we talk about orchestration that we're somehow magically, creating one large place where we're going to bring in all of these approved technologies and say this is the only way to go. That's not what I'm suggesting. What we already do today from an orchestration standpoint is bring all the constituents together inside the organization that has to do with authorization, and then from a partner standpoint via APIs, make sure that we're as flexible as possible to work with all the different attribute sources, including those real-time events that are happening from, again, people like CrowdStrike or SailPoint, for example, and take that information and make policy around it. So we do that today, but enhancing those partnerships and making it easier for our customers to consume those is what I meant by that collaboration.
Perfect. Excellent. Good point. So while we wait for any other questions about to pop up maybe on the feed, I'm going to take you out of your comfort zone for a second. So Jim, I know you're a huge movie buff and we've talked movies all the time. What is the most underrated movie that you think is out there that you think is just fantastic, but that maybe very few people pay attention to?
That is a tough question. I don't know about underrated. I guess I'll say an embarrassing fact about me rather, and I don't know if you're the macho guys, you probably laugh at me, but I often ask this question to people: what's the movie that you've seen the most often? And embarrassingly, mine is Dirty Dancing. I've got two daughters. I'm a big Patrick Swayze fan, and I've probably seen that movie more often than any other. But I don't know about underrated, but certainly probably embarrassing to admit that.
Excellent. I love it. And as you know, mine would be Happy Gilmore. So, also probably not underrated, maybe, but that's a discussion for a different day. Oh,
I don't think either of us are talking about Oscar award-winning actors in those cases. So.
No. Those Adam Sandler's turning some heads. But as we've been talking about that. Another great question coming in. Many government organizations have implemented IAM. Is ABAC a good replacement for IAM, or is it complementary?
It's 100% complementary, and I'm glad someone brought up the government. We already see that's part of our base today is government organizations. And so when you look at the types of problems that authorization had presented itself, certainly governments with the complexity and the need for high levels and different levels of security had this issue for many years, even before the cloud transformation. That has continued, and you see things like the White House directive around zero trust. The amount of inbound inquiries now of government organizations creating access or ABAC programs it's probably jumped about 200% in terms of the amount of inquiries that we're getting just around that space. And part of that could be because of the White House initiative. But again, IAM this is not a replacement for IAM. IAM vendors today are getting asked about dynamic policies that they traditionally have handled and in some cases used role-based to do, or they try to augment that role-based to come up with this solution. IAM and authorization vendors like ourselves should collaborate and enhance and take that next step. The role-based or RBAC is a step in the right direction. And so we can leverage those policies that are created from a static standpoint and now build more complicated or more dynamic policies using ABAC or PBAC around those principles that were already created for role-based. So we would never say you need to rip those out. That's step one. Right. So you don't want to remove that. It's a maturity.
Excellent. And that was a great question because that's certainly one that comes up in a lot of conversations as people get to know more about what authorization is, for sure. I think that's all of the questions we have for today, Jim, and certainly folks, anybody who didn't have their question answered, please leave it in the comments under the video now or after the show. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn and ask us a question there. Subscribe to our channel, certainly, if you want to see more dynamically speaking episodes. We have a few more with Jim that are posted online. And go to axiomatics.com. We've got a great lot of content there, some new stuff that we've just posted in the last week, even on a wide variety of subjects that it sounds like it would be of interest to this audience. Jim, I want to thank you for your time today. Much appreciated. I know the technical bumps at the start, always something right when you're live, and folks joining us, thank you as well for putting up with all of this. This has been a great and engaging conversation. So thank you very much, sir, for your time. Looking forward to the next time we get to chat.
Awesome to be here, and thanks everybody for the great questions. It was awesome to participate.
Terrific. So thanks again, folks. Again, check us out on LinkedIn. Be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel.